Well, this is video number 10, and this one is going to be, for me anyway, a little bit more enjoyable than the Great Depression one. I don't really much like talking about the Great Depression section of it, only because I feel like that's just not my strongest part of history. And there's a lot of reasons for that. But anyway, this is, we're going to highlight what has happened since World War One stopped and how it's going to lead to World War II. And I call this one the episode where nothing has changed. And I think that we can, I'll agree with that when, once we go through this, that there has nothing really changed from World War One. And I tell my students that World War II is fault because nothing changed from World War One. You know, anything that we were fighting for borders and for land and for money, none of that changed. If nothing else, it only got worse. So I'm more excited that I get to finally show off my memes. I had a whole section of these. I actually had them printed out and ready to go for this 9 weeks, and here we are. Anyway, so just as a recap, going into this, after World War One ended, the world powers got together: Great Britain, France, United States, and Italy, got together and they decided what needed to be done to Germany. And basically, it was that Germany had to admit and accept that they were responsible for all of the war. And then they had to pay reparations for everything. Well, Germany was not happy with it, but they didn't have a choice. They had forced their leader, Kaiser Wilhelm II, to step down. So they didn't really have a capable leader in place to argue or negotiate their situation. So this is one of my favorite memes here, Germany reading the Treaty of Versailles and then the Allies laughing at them when they see everything that they have to pay. Now, the biggest reason that Germany is saddled with it is because the country of Austria-Hungary no longer exists. And Austria-Hungary, Hungary says, well, it's not our fault because we're no longer part of Austria. And Austria is like, well, it's not our fault because we're no longer part of Hungary. And this is really going to upset Germany, and it's going to upset a lot of the leaders of Germany, rightfully so. What we're going to find out in this lesson is that Hitler ignores the Treaty of Versailles. Like, he totally and completely ignores it. He does this for several reasons. When he first starts doing it, it's for economic reasons. And later on, it's for territory, it's for borders. And this is where the League of Nations should have stepped in, especially Neville Chamberlain, but we'll get into that one. But Germany after World War One, it was kind of like, whoa, let's do that again. It was so much fun, and that's exactly what's going to happen. And Hitler completely and totally just destroys the Treaty of Versailles. He ignores it like it never happened. All right, so let's get into the lesson then. World War II had its beginnings in the ideas of Adolf Hitler. He believed that the Germans belonged to a so-called Aryan race that was superior to all other races and nationalities. Now, unlike what a lot of people believe, in my research, I found that Aryan doesn't necessarily mean blonde hair and blue eyes. It was just a pure bloodline that he felt was there. Because many of his people that were in power with him did not have blonde hair and blue eyes. It was one of the doctors, and one of the members of his staff, and I can't remember now exactly who it was, came up with the concept of the blue eyes and blonde hair. But according to my research, it wasn't necessarily Hitler. But he did believe that Germany was capable of building a great civilization. But to be this great power, Germany would need a lot more land to support a larger population. His idea was building like this major paradise for Germans. Okay, So he indicated that a Nazi regime would find this land to the east in the Soviet Union. So they must prepare for war with the Soviet Union. Once the Soviet Union had been defeated, according to Hitler, its land would be resettled by German peasants. And then the Slavic people that were part of the Soviet Union, would be used as slave labor to build the Third Reich, an Aryan racial state that Hitler thought would dominate Europe for 1,000 years. So he takes a lot of his teachings from biblical stories, also from Napoleon. You think he would learn, but you know. Now, one thing about this, I want to go back to the treaties and how Germany was also pulled away from land. In the treaty that Lenin signed with Germany before the end of World War One, it gave Germany land, Poland, and specifically, and that was the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk. Well, in the Treaty of Versailles, Germany was forced to give all that land up. That will come into play soon. All right, so after World War One, the Treaty of Versailles had limited Germany's military power. Hitler posed as a man of peace, and he stressed that Germany wished to revise the unfair provisions of the treaty by peaceful means. Now, in all likelihood, this was truly where he wanted to start. It was where he got more and more power that it became a problem. Now, for all we know, he could have had the ideas that he had all along, but in research, it states that, we can kind of see that this is what he wanted to begin with. And this is why this is so fascinating and also terrifying, that someone that could be presented as a man of peace ends up like this. Okay. Now, excuse me, Germany, he said, only wanted its rightful place among the European states. Excuse me, got strangled there a little bit. So part of the Treaty of Versailles stated that he had to give up military weapons. He had to downgrade his army, his air force, his navy, all military. They could no longer produce weapons or ammunition. Well, one of the first things he does is he creates a military. He creates an air force. And he begins a military draft that would expand Germany's army from 100,000 to 550,000 troops. And these are direct violations of the Treaty of Versailles. No one stepped in. France, Great Britain, and Italy condemned their actions and warned against future aggressive steps. But we're in the middle of a Great Depression. All of these countries are rebuilding. So they're distracted by their own internal problems. And so they didn't have a way to go in and make Germany stop this. And Hitler was honestly planning on this. The thing about this is that all of these countries were distracted. They were rebuilding, and they could not keep their eye on Germany. Hitler was also convinced that the Western states had no intention of using force to maintain the Treaty of Versailles. And he's not wrong, because the thing of it is that, they don't have the military anymore to do it. They don't have the money. They're rebuilding their nations. And so it was just a situation where Hitler was right. The Western states have got their own problems, and so they're working on that. All right, so on March 7th, 1936, he sent German troops into an area called the Rhineland. And the Rhineland was part of Germany, but according to the Treaty of Versailles, it was a demilitarized zone. Now, I don't know if I'm going to be able to draw this correctly or not, but we're going to do our best. So if we have, not with that one, we're not. If we have a very bad map here, France had wanted a piece of land in between Germany and France to be its own separate country, and it to be kind of like a buffer zone. And so France did not get this in the Treaty of Versailles necessarily, but they did get a section called Rhineland. And it was not allowed, I don't know if that can be seen or not, it was not allowed to have any military there. Okay, so it couldn't have any weapons in there. Okay, so if it was demilitarized, that was the Treaty of Versailles. So France didn't get their own separate little buffer country between them, but they did get a section that the Treaty of Versailles said could not have any weapons. Okay, so Rhineland right there could not have any weapons. Now, Germany could have weapons over here. Can't point, right? They could have weapons here. They just could not have weapons here. Okay, so this is demilitarized. They were not permitted to have weapons or fortifications. And so France had the right to use any force against Germany if anybody came into Rhineland, but they could not act without British support because they were broke. If you look at all the wars or all the battles fought in World War One, the majority of them are fought in France, and they are working hard to try to rebuild. Okay, so this is actually another one of my favorite little memes. When my son was growing up, we loved the TV show iCarly, and if you can see it here, the two girls there represent France and England, and they're like, "Hey, what you got there?" And back here, it's an ostrich, and he's like, "Oh, nothing. It's just a smoothie. Please don't see the ostrich back there." And it says a massive and growing army that defies the rules of the Treaty of Versailles. And this is what is happening. Like, Germany's building up their army, and everybody sees it. Nobody's willing to do anything because they don't want to get back into a war again so soon. Now, Great Britain did not support the use of force against Germany. The British government viewed the occupation of German territory by German troops as a reasonable action by a dissatisfied power. So, what that means is that they have a right to defend themselves. I mean, this is their own back garden, meaning Rhineland. Well, this is the act or a decision made by the prime minister of that time period, Neville Chamberlain. I am not a fan of Neville Chamberlain. If you are, good for you. I am not. So Great Britain began to practice a policy called appeasement. And this is just giving them what they want, hoping that it will satisfy them. If we can give them reasonable demands, then they would be content and will keep power in Europe. It's almost like, if you got a cranky toddler that won't go to sleep, you keep giving them little things to keep them occupied, hoping that they'll go to sleep. Eventually, you're just going to have to make them go to sleep. Well, this was kind of the same thing. They just kept giving them things, saying, "Okay, this will satisfy them. This will satisfy them," and it didn't. I mean, Hitler knew what was going on. He knew what he was doing. He knew this was going to happen. And so he just kept asking for more and more. All right, so Hitler's going to gain new allies. Benito Mussolini had long dreamed of creating a new Roman Empire in the Mediterranean. And so they invaded Ethiopia in 1935. So French and British opposed his invasion. So Hitler kind of sided with Mussolini. So they began to draw closer together. And so they both sent troops into Spain to help in the Spanish Civil War. Okay, so they kind of saw that they were had common political and economic interests, and so they became allies. Well, Mussolini was kind of more of Hitler's puppet, but still allies. Okay, so a month later, Mussolini spoke of the new alliance, and it called them the Rome-Berlin Axis, and this is where we get the title for their alliance during World War II is the Axis powers. All right, by 1937, Germany was once more a world power. And he had, for all that Hitler did horrible things, he also did build up the economics in Germany, and he helped with jobs. The Volkswagen car company was kind of started with his initiative. He did start weapons factories. So, while I'm not giving him a round of applause for what he did do what he said he was going to do to the people. And that's why it's so important. And what I always tell my students, it's why it's always so important. You don't put all your eggs in one basket with a politician, and you don't look to a politician to make you happy and to fulfill your life. Because he said, I'm going to make things better. And he did make things better for the German people, but he made things a heck of a lot worse for a lot of other people. All right, so Hitler was convinced that neither France nor Great Britain would provide much opposition to his plans. He decided to pursue one of his goals, Anschluss, or a union with Austria, which is where he was born. So he threatened Austria with invasion. He forced the Austrian chancellor to put Austrian Nazis in charge of the government. The new government promptly invited German troops to enter Austria and help maintain law and order. And so he annexed Austria. And annex just means he took over them. Like he took over the country, brought it into the German Confederation. His next objective was the destruction of Czechoslovakia. He demanded that Germany be given Sudetenland, an area in northwestern Czechoslovakia that was largely inhabited by Germans. He stated that he would risk World War to achieve his objective. There was a Munich conference that was organized, and it was attended by representatives from Britain, France, Germany, and Italy. They did not object to his plans, but reached an agreement that met virtually all of his demands. So once again, they are allowing him to completely defy the Treaty of Versailles. They're ignoring all the weapons that he is growing in his country, along with the armies, and they're giving him land that he was forced to give up, or Germany was forced to give up after World War One. It's just a constant, well, let's just give him this, let's just give him this, let's just give him this. German troops were allowed to occupy the Sudetenland. The Czechs were abandoned by their Western allies. The Munich Conference was the high point of the Western appeasement of Hitler. When Neville Chamberlain, who was the British Prime Minister, returned to Britain from Munich, he boasted that the agreement meant peace for our time, because Hitler had promised Chamberlain that he would make no more demands, and Chamberlain believed Hitler's promises. I don't like Chamberlain at all. All right, so Hitler was more convinced than ever that the Western democracies were weak and would not fight. He was sure that he could not make a mistake, and he had not been satisfied by the Munich Conference. In March of 1939, Hitler invaded and took control of Bohemia and Moravia in western Czechoslovakia. Go figure. In the eastern part of the country, Slovakia became a puppet state controlled by the Nazi government. And by March 15th, 1939, Hitler declared in Prague that he would be declared the greatest German of them all. So couldn't see this coming. At last, the Western states reacted to the Nazi threat. Hitler's aggression had made clear that his promises were worthless. When he began to demand that the Polish port of Danzig, Great Britain saw the danger and offered to protect Poland in the event of war. At the same time, both France and Britain realized that only the Soviet Union was powerful enough to help contain the Nazi aggression. They began political and military negotiations with Stalin, the Soviet dictator. Hitler pressed on in the belief that the West would not fight over Poland. He now feared that the West and the Soviet Union might make an alliance. Such an alliance could mean a two-front war for Germany. So to prevent this possibility, he made his own agreement with Joseph Stalin. On August 23rd, 1939, Germany and the Soviet Union signed the Nazi-Soviet Non-Aggression Pact. The two nations promised not to attack one another. Can you see where this is going? To get the Non-Aggression Pact, Hitler offered Stalin control of eastern Poland and the Baltic states. He expected to fight the Soviet Union anyway, so it didn't matter to him what he promised. He was going to break his promise. He just wanted to have a show that he was trying to work with people. So the Non-Aggression Pact is announced. The world is shocked by this because this treaty pretty much gave Hitler the freedom to attack Poland. He told his generals, now Poland is in the position in which I wanted her. I'm only afraid that at the last moment, some swine will submit to me for a plan for mediation. September 1st, German forces invaded Poland. 2 days later, Britain and France declared war on Germany. So we're going to end there today because that's the German section of it, and we'll come back and talk about other countries a little bit more in Italy and Japan in their lead to war. But the biggest thing is I just want to make sure that is understood is that in a hasty agreement to conduct peace, we made things worse. And, you know, I try not to talk too much politics with students because I feel like that's an area that you don't really get into in a classroom. It's best that, in my opinion, that you keep all your opinions neutral. And I'm going to do that here too. But I do tell my students to be careful of politicians. Be careful of voting the same way that you've always voted. Be careful of looking to a government to take care of you and a politician to take care of you. When you start looking for someone to take care of you, to give you everything without working for it, you're going to start being beholden to that person to the point where you can no longer vote them out because you won't have anything anymore. A government big enough to give you everything is big enough to take it away. And I tell my students that Hitler's way to power is a very, very good lesson because he promised the people everything and he gave it. But in the end, he also got their complete and total control over them, over their minds, over their lives. And Stalin did too. And we are in a situation where in our society, we want free things. We want free health care. We want free education. We want free this. We want free that. Now, here's my thing. I'm not saying that our country doesn't need an overhaul in education and an overhaul in medical care. I completely agree. But nothing is ever free. Someone has to pay for that. And as Margaret Thatcher said, the problem with socialism is eventually you run out of other people's money. Socialism on paper looks great. The reality of it is it very rarely works. And I'm not here to get in a debate about that. That's my opinion. If you like it, great. I'd love to sit down and have an honest conversation with you on it. But I am a historian. I am a teacher. And I see where things like this, where you give a leader absolute and total control, that it leads to a lot of problems. We're seeing it right here. So my best advice is never vote for a party. Don't just vote for someone because they're part of that party. Understand what you're voting for. Understand that voting for a party or a person could have impacts that you don't want later on down the road. Never look to one person to make you happy. You have to do that. I see during this whole section of World War I leading into World War II so many things that if we could have just done differently would have had a bigger impact on the world. But it's how it played out. It's how it was supposed to play out. It was the only way it was going to play out. So we'll get back into Hitler. We'll get back into some other nations leading into World War II. I hope you're enjoying these videos. These are, I'm not going to say not as fun as the World War ones. This gets into a little bit more heavy information. But I don't have a whole lot more that I'm going to do in this section. And then I do have some fun ones that other people have asked me to do. So anyway, that is going to be our time for today. And I hope you all have had a great afternoon. And if I can figure out how to stop this, I will do so. All right, y'all have a great day. Bye.